Hey folks, it's Toby Mathis here. We need to talk about a question that lit up the internet a little bit. Dave Ramsey asked, why do people put rental properties in an LLC? So let's just hear what he has to say.
If an LLC owns the rental house, the tenant gets drunk and falls off the porch and decides it's your fault and sues you, they have to sue the owner of the house, which is the LLC. And if they were to win, they can take what that LLC owns, but nothing else. So your other assets, like your personal residence, are then protected.
All right, let's kind of dive into this. I went and I looked at some of the comments, which are actually pretty wild. Some said, oh, LLCs are useless. Others said it's just about lawsuits. Well, it's way more than that. So let's peel back the layers, and I'll show you why wealthy people love LLCs and why you should too. So first off, what Dave said is, hey, if somebody gets drunk and sues you, decides it's your fault, there has to be some negligence, right? But I'll just give you an example. I had a client who had an apartment building and an invitee, somebody came over from, that was invited to come into the property, was in a wheelchair, and they stepped on a nail. This is actually a real life situation. Stepped on a flipping nail and ended up saying they got an infection in their foot. And they sued, and it was 7 figures, guys. It was 7 figures. That's what the insurance ended up covering. Now, they had an LLC that isolated it, which is absolutely great protection, but you have to have the property titled in the LLC. The LLC has to be compliant, meaning that it's up to date with the Secretary of State. It has an operating agreement, it has good books and records and everything else, but you still have these issues. And so one of the comments was like, I will handle that lawsuit. I'm sorry, lawsuits take up a bunch of time and you need to be able to cut bait. You need to be able to cut it off. Say, I'm done. And LLCs allow us to do that. Yes, LLCs cost money, right? You file with the state, pay your fees, maybe you have to renew every year, right? But here's the mistake. People think that's all it is. And an LLC isn't just paperwork, it's a business entity. And that means it needs to have an operating agreement, the rule book for how it works. It has to be written out, and it's not one of these little crappy legal doom where you get a few pages that everybody uses. It needs to be specific for whatever you are doing. And if you're a real estate investor, there needs to be specificity in there. Otherwise, it could blow up in your face, and they could pierce the veil of that LLC if you don't comport with its rules. And there are lots of cases where somebody had a generic agreement, they didn't know what the requirements were, they missed one, and the court says, we're going to ignore it. It needs to have an EIN, which is an employer identification number, just like your social security number. It's for a business, and it needs to keep its book and records. But here's the thing, everybody has to keep books and records, but if you want it to work, you actually have to do it. And you have to treat it like a business. If you treat it like a business, the courts and the IRS will treat it like a business. And once you do that, you unlock the world of benefits. And let me talk about it real quick, because what David just talked about, what Dave Ramsey just talked about, was inside liability. How do I keep from getting my personal house and all my other assets taken if I get sued? That is inside liability. I want you to think of liability in 2 buckets. Inside liability is the tenant slips, sues, that's inside that property LLC. It's contained. It can't leapfrog into your personal assets. It's like it's in a steel box. The liability stays in the box. It doesn't come get you. There's also outside liability, right? Somebody sues you. You have a car wreck or you have a business dispute, personal judgment. One of your kids, this is a case we've seen way too often, teenage children get into a car accident and they come after the parents. And they're coming after your rental properties. With an LLC, your rentals are boxed up and harder to touch. And if you use a place like Wyoming, where you can create anonymity and even more protections, they can't take it. And I don't mean that lightly. They cannot take that property. They can't take the LLC. That's outside liability. No LLC, sorry, you're a piñata, waiting for someone to take a swing with a big stick. With LLCs, every property is in its own bucket. One crack doesn't sink the whole ship. Now, here's something else people don't understand, right? They're like, I don't need an LLC, I don't have any equity. Wrong answer. It's about the cash flow. It's not just about equity. If you're making $1,500 a month on a property and somebody wins a judgment, they're going to take that income stream. How do I know? Because I've done it, right? This is something that we do. LLCs protect rents and profits, not just the bricks and sticks. Now, keep in mind, if you want, you're going to isolate it. You want to make it to where that's the biggest target, so you can do something that's even more important than anything else. Settle it and get it out of your hair. Let your insurance do its job. Make sure you have insurance. Even if you have an LLC, you have insurance and you have an umbrella, because you never know what the future is going to throw at you. You can have a massive lawsuit. You could have a massive liability that, like when there's cases where the back deck of a property fell and so many people are hurt, your insurance is just going to get eaten up and exhausted. You got to make sure that the LLC works, and if they try to get through the LLC, that there's another level. That's where that umbrella comes in. But you want to make sure that you are stepping away so that you are not personally on the hook for whatever occurs on that property, and that's, you can't do anything else. You have to use an entity like an LLC. Now, there's something else called stealth wealth. It's using anonymity, and this is where LLCs can actually get fun, because if you do it right, your name's nowhere in a public record. So use Dave's example. Somebody gets drunk and they sue the property owner. You don't want them to know it's you. I don't want Toby Mathis' name attached to all these properties, because lawyers will go fishing in the public records for assets. If your name's on 10 property, you're basically wearing a neon sign that says, here's a jackpot, sue me, right? That can shake you down. They know you have something to lose. But LLCs can create security through obscurity, and that's called stealth wealth. It's the best lawsuit's the one that never gets filed, right? So you use a Wyoming holding LLC, and you have it as the manager on those properties. Your name never shows up. If you want to take it another level, use a land trust on each property to protect the name in which it's held, the title. No property is held in the same entity. So if I have one LLC and it holds 3 properties, all 3 properties, they go after one, they're going after 3. One of the things that prevents lawsuits is if the name on each property is something different. You can use series LLCs, you could use land trust, you could use an LLC per property. Sometimes, some folks, that gets expensive depending on your state, right? So we can use land trust too, where there is no filing fee, where there is a way to use them in conjunction with an LLC, but at the end of the day, you don't see a series of properties that are related to each other. They don't see it in a public record. Now, some of you guys are going to say, but in discovery, they're going to find it. They got to sue you first, and they got to go through discovery. They got to actually generally win a lawsuit before they can do discovery on your finances, right? So what does your financial condition have to do with whether or not you were negligent, right? Usually it's irrelevant until you actually get that judgment, and that could take 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? In some cases, it's even longer, and it's very, very expensive. So you want to force settlement, and that's where that anonymity comes in. You don't want them to know what you have. You don't want them to know whether you're rich or poor, right? One property, that's all they're looking at. Very little equity. So the cash flow is really all we have to go off of. Here's a settlement to make you go away. That's what you want. Make it so you can sleep at night and get rid of it. So when you go beyond 1 or 2 rentals, that's where things can get really serious. And that's when you want to use a Wyoming LLC on top. That's because you get stealth wealth. That's where you get it to where they can't take your LLCs away. And you have property level LLCs underneath, sometimes in conjunction with land trusts. Why do we use Wyoming? Because it's the strongest laws in the country. Creditors can't just grab your assets. They can't just take the LLC away, right? At best, they can get a charging order, which is a piece of paper that says that they wait around, maybe they collect some crumbs, maybe you distribute some profits to them, maybe, right? Nobody sues for maybe. They want money. They sue for money. And if they can't get it, settle. That's what you want. You want to make sure that these things happen. And that's why the wealthy stack LLCs like Lego bricks. They're layers of protection. So I might have the actual properties in LLCs, and that's held by an LLC in an anonymity, where we have anonymity in a state like Wyoming, and then I may own that through a trust. I may own that through just a simple living trust. I may own that through an asset protection trust if I am really in a high profile or high litigation career, like maybe you're a surgeon or something. You may want to consider, how do I make sure that this is never molested from the activities that I'm doing on the outside? That's that outside liability we talked about. And also I want to make sure that my properties, they can't take them all with one thing. So unlocking the benefits of the LLCs, and this is where it gets really good. If you set up your LLCs like a real business with an operating agreement, EIN, books and records, you unlock all kinds of benefits. What are some of them? Well, you can avoid probate in every state that you own real estate. If you die owning rentals in multiple states in your name, your family could have to probate in each one of those states. You put them in LLCs, and now it's personal property in your state, you don't have to probate, and it keeps you clean as far as what your heirs are going to have to deal with when you pass away. It also protects properties from each other, right? We already talked about that. If one property gets sued, the others are shielded, and it protects you from them and them from you, right? The wall works both ways. I can protect my real estate from my personal activities, or the activities of my kids or my family, or things that I can't control, right? So it keeps my stuff separate from myself. Now, other benefits is if you do this right, you could secure financing directly through the LLC where it's non-secured by you. You don't have to guarantee the loans quite often, right? Lenders may allow loans in the LLC's name, keeping your personal name out of it. There's also tax reduction options when you use your LLC, usually when you pair it with a management corporation or an LLC taxed as a corporation that is acting like a family office. This is where you could start pulling money that otherwise would have ended on your tax return and avoid it entirely by putting it up into a corporate entity where you could put it in a DB plan, 401k, pay it out to your kids as salaries, other things that allows you to divide it up and keep it off of your name if you have a bunch of money. The corp manages the properties, pays reasonable wages, and unlocks other deductions like, for example, C Corps can reimburse 100% of your medical, dental, and vision care. It could do different types of retirement plans. It can have fringe benefits. You could also manage other activities like even your stocks and other things, or run a side business through it, right? These are where you start getting other benefits. So that's a buffet of benefits, and that's why the wealthy don't just own in their own name, they use LLCs. Now, one of the comments was like, oh man, this is going to make a tax mess. What? They don't know that you could actually have an LLC that's disregarded for tax purposes. So, and by the way, people that worry about taxes, won't the LLC mean more returns? No, it doesn't, because a single member LLC is a disregarded entity, if you want it to be. The IRS ignores it. You still file it on your regular Schedule E. So like I could have 3 LLCs, 0 extra tax returns, at least from the federal standpoint. Your state's going to dictate whether there's anything on the local level. But from a federal standpoint, we can completely eliminate them. No new return, no added complexity. It's the same rules as if you own them in your individual name. You get the legal protection without tax headaches. So like let's just say you had one property that you own, you put it in an LLC. I could have no extra tax compliance. I've isolated that property so I don't have to worry about them coming after my personal home, my retirement, my other assets, my other business interests, my stocks, bonds, whatever, and come after my family. That's peace of mind. So let me just give you a story. So there was a client that had 3 rentals in his name. The tenant sued for mold on one property. The tenant had them all in his name, or the client had them all in his name. So all 3 properties, plus his personal residence, were all at risk. And he ended up fighting this thing off. It was an absolute bogus claim, as a lot of mold claims are. There's no national standard for these things. A lot of times they just, hey, I get some dampness and I just want to try to shake down the landlord, so I go after it. Well, the client won the lawsuit, thank God, but it cost him over $200,000 in legal fees that came out of his pocket, plus years of emotional pain that ultimately led to his personal bankruptcy. It cost him too much money, time, and energy. 3 LLCs, each property in its own bucket, would have done it for him. All owned by a Wyoming LLC, they wouldn't have seen it, because this is one of those cases where they sued him because they saw where he lived. And they said, you must be wealthy. He was mortgaged to his eyebrows, right? But they didn't know that. The tenant just went after him. A single LLC around all 3 would have also allowed him to walk away at some point. But they were going after millions of dollars. So what you do, you put them in an LLC. My advice would be to have them each in their own LLC. If you only have 3 properties, it's really important to you. One property gets sued, great, they can have it. That's the most that they can get, is that property. The other 2, untouchable. And that forces settlements. Otherwise, people are not reasonable. If they think they can shake you down and cause you pain, they think that's a dollar figure that's going to come back. And in my story that I told you, the people that sued, he was actually, because he won the lawsuit, he was able to get attorney's fees and costs. In that particular case, they went bankrupt. They left him with nothing. He ends up bankrupt. So what do we get? A big legal mess that the lawyers won, and the 2 people that were fighting both lost. They both end up in bankruptcy. So that's not theory. That's real life. What would have prevented the devastation? the LLCs, right? But it costs too much. Come on, give me a break. You want to put yourself through that stuff? So why do people put rentals in LLCs? Real simple. There's a liability shield, both inside and outside protection. It's protection of the cash flow, not just the equity. It's stealth wealth. It's security through obscurity. You're forcing settlements. You can scale it with a Wyoming holding LLC. That's why the rich use it. You can unlock other benefits when you treat it like a business. For example, financing, tax strategies that you can do using a management corp. And it's all without creating a whole bunch of new returns and a ton of extra complexity. You can do these fairly concise without creating complexity in your life. And that's why serious investors use LLCs. Not because they like paperwork, but because they like keeping what they build. So David Ramsey asked the question. My answer, why people use LLCs is because they don't want one bad tenant, one bad lawsuit, one bad year to wreck everything. If you're holding rentals in your personal name, you're gambling. Use LLCs, land trust, combinations, sometimes different things in your state, and you're playing like the casino. You get to set the rules. So if you like this information, smash the like button, subscribe. Tell me in the comments, are you still investing in your own name, or are you using LLCs? What do you think? Do you think people should use LLCs for their rental real estate? Give me your stories. If you know of actual real life situations, please share them. You can tell me I'm all wet and just do insurance. I'm not going to agree with you just because I have too many years of experience and I've seen the devastation, but I still appreciate your comments. So please put them below, and I'll see you guys again later.